Recently, we've been talking about conversations with Jesus and about Jesus from the Gospel of John. And the reason that we're doing this is to learn from the master communicator himself how to communicate well, because this vlog is all about building bridges and communication. So I want to speak to a particular encounter between a guy named Nicodemus, one of the rulers of the Jews in Jerusalem, and Jesus. Now, Jesus is just this rogue preacher, and Nicodemus is this important ruler. And you may remember the story that Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night to ask him a question. Now, that's where we need to start this discussion. Why did Nicodemus come at night? Why was he afraid to come in the daytime? Did he not want anybody to know that he was talking to Jesus, that this might give credibility to Jesus, that an important person was willing to talk with him and kind of validate him? Was he concerned about his own reputation? Would he be offended by, would the others be offended by him communicating with Jesus? So he's got all these possible things that he's dealing with. So he comes by night, but Jesus accepts his invitation. He enters into a conversation with him on his terms. And that's such an important thing to remember. As we talk with other people about spiritual things, about important things, we need to let them come to us on their terms, where we understand that they may not have a clear position, where they may be really genuinely curious but not know. And we're not going to take advantage of that. We're not going to expose that. We're not going to embarrass those people. We're going to just have the conversation that matters based upon the willingness to start the conversation and the willingness to engage in the conversation, even if a person comes at night, even if a person comes not with the clearest of motives. Have the conversation that begins to open up things to even more significant discussions. So Nicodemus begins this nighttime conversation with Jesus with a statement, but implicit in the statement is a question. He shows respect to Jesus and he calls him rabbi, teacher. And he says, the word is out on you. You're doing some miraculous things. And we know that someone like you would have to come from God because you couldn't do these miracles without God. But implicit in that statement of Nicodemus's is the question, who are you? Are you from God? Are you the Messiah? Are you an important person? Help me understand who you are. And how does Jesus answer? Does he begin with his resume? Does he begin with a statement of, I'm somebody important and you need to believe in me? No. He actually starts the process of this conversation by saying, if you want to have a spiritual conversation, we're going to have to acknowledge that we're not going to be able to get very far if we don't start with understanding that we need to ask God for his insight, for his understanding. And that's okay. I think that's a very wonderful way of beginning that conversation process, to say, hey, if we're going to have a spiritual conversation, let's acknowledge that there is a God to talk about and that he needs to help us understand who he is. Because that's basically what Jesus is saying when he says, Nicodemus, to understand spiritual things, you need to be born again. Which then invites Nicodemus to ask a second question or make a second statement to which Jesus will have another answer. Nicodemus still doesn't get it. Jesus has just told him to be born again, and his immediate question is, what am I supposed to do, get back in my mother's womb and be born again? And Jesus points out, no. That's not what this is about. This is not a conversation about me and proving who I am. This is a conversation about you, Nicodemus. Are you willing? Are you willing to receive spiritual truth? Are you willing to let all of your degrees and all of your insight and all of your knowledge be set aside for God to lead you and to give you an idea or an answer to your question? That's what being born again means. It means that you're open to letting God direct you. And that's about you, Nicodemus. That's not about me. And that's what Jesus would say to all of us. In order to begin a conversation about spiritual things, we have to ask ourselves, are we even open to having this conversation? Are we really willing to learn that maybe there is spiritual truth that we need to embrace? That's a very important part of the conversation. So the whole conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus ends with Nicodemus asking him his final question. How can these things be so? It's like he's just so frustrated. How am I supposed to know these things? How am I supposed to understand if you're the Messiah, if you're the true Son of God, if you're who people are saying you are? How am I supposed to know this stuff? And Jesus continues to bring the conversation back to Nicodemus. I've already told you, if I try to answer all your earthly questions and you don't understand, man, you're never going to believe my spiritual answers to your spiritual questions. And at one point, in one of the most famous verses in the Bible, Jesus points out the bottom line main question that he's not only going to ask Nicodemus to consider, but every human being on this planet has to answer the same question. And it's John 3:16, that God so loved the world that he gave his own son, that whoever would believe in him would have everlasting or eternal life. That's the question that Jesus wants to take me to, you to, and Nicodemus and everyone else. Do you believe that I am the one that God sent, that because of what I'm going to do for you, die on a cross, that you can have eternal life after this life is over? That's the million-dollar question. And he's taking a religious leader down this path of understanding. You think this is an intellectual question. This is not an intellectual question. This is a spiritual question, and you must be born again to be able to receive God's leadership, God's teaching to you, to understand whether or not I am who you're wondering I am.